we take in about 10 to 100 million bits of information per second in our unconscious, subconscious minds all the time. And our conscious mind is able to process about 4 to 5 bits per second of information, having a huge impact on how we feel, how we see the world, and how we move through the world. Healing anxiety isn't just about feeling better temporarily, it's about working with the underlying conditions and things that are happening so that we can rewire our bodies and our minds so that we can live more meaningful lives. Here's the truth about healing and navigating anxiety. If we don't look at the underlying causes of what's causing us to feel anxious and have anxiety, then we won't be able to navigate or work with it. We have to go deeper. We have to understand what's actually causing it in the first place to work with it. Hey friends, welcome back to Queen of Belonging, where we develop the tools and skills necessary to live fully embodied and meaningful lives. If you're finally ready to heal from anxiety and live the life that you've always wanted, then you have come to the right place in the right video. Today I'm going to cover 8 key steps that you can take to start this journey. Let's talk about medication a little bit. I see medication as a tool and not a solution, and I think that it's really important to work with your trusted healthcare provider to explore that process and what's best for your own body. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Some people take medication as a way to, their life journey is more of like, I have anxiety, maybe they're not in a place or even have the awareness of underlying trauma or wanting to navigate through or deal with that, and that's fine. And taking medication to just lessen the impact and feeling and experience of that, and that's the end of the story, is fine. And also, in this space, we are really going on a transformational journey and wanting to explore and be curious about what's happening underneath all of that. So our journey may look a little bit different and we may not stop there. And so for me, I didn't want to stop there. What I wanted to do was use a medication not to make the feelings and sensations stop and go away forever, but to soften them a bit, to slow down my racing thoughts so that I could have some more spaciousness in my body to actually learn somatic tools and skills and work with a therapist and give myself a little more spaciousness to go through my process in a way that wasn't being completely dictated and controlled by the feeling of needing to make this feeling go away. And that can be a hard thing to do because if you take a medication and that is your focus and your motivation, what can happen is when you take the medication, you may feel a bit better. So then you may be less motivated to do some of the underlying work and you may just stop there. And then you may go on your journey and realize that you actually do want to do more of that work. And that's okay too. But if you're really wanting to do this work now, it's really important to realize that when you take a medication, you may start to feel a little bit better. And it's really going to be on you and hopefully a support network if you have it to continue to motivate yourself to continue going through the process even though you feel a little bit better. Anxiety medication can be really great for that. I took a super low dose of Zoloft, the lowest dose of Zoloft they would give me. I started to learn about somatic practice, work with a somatic therapist, and then through that process, as I gained more skills, and once I started to feel like I had a little bit more agency and control over my experience, I slowly started to wean off the Zoloft, and then I started to work with some herbs, which I'm going to talk about next. And then I started to lessen my dependence on herbs so that I could work with them in a way that felt reciprocal, but wasn't like I need this in order to not feel this way. There's all kinds of anxiety medications that people use and all kinds of doses. You want to work with a psychiatrist that you really trust and that understands the journey that you're going on, and a somatic therapist so they can help you in coming up with a plan that works really well for you. Herbs, plant medicine. Working with plants can be a really powerful tool for healing from anxiety. And so we often kind of like grip onto tools really tightly as a way to make the thing we don't like go away. And that can kind of backfire on us. And so there's this sacred balance of being able to be in right relationship with plant, with medications, with all the tools that we're using so that they can work with us in a way that feels in alignment with the journey that we're on and the way that we want to experience transformation and healing or a little bit of space from anxiety. There are a lot of different herbs that you can work with for tending to anxiety, for healing your nerves on a physical level, literally rebuilding the myelin sheath, which is that like insulating coating over your nerves, ones that you can work with for helping with sleep or with nausea associated with anxiety. There's many different herbs. They have many different uses. Herbs work on an energetic level with the energetics of our body and also the energetics of the plant. So it is important, if you haven't worked with herbs before, to work with a trusted herbalist or do some research online through books. There's so many good resources for working with plants, and I'll share resources I love in a future video. And I'm also going to create a video that goes into some of the different herbs that are really great for working with anxiety and which kind of anxiety, which herbs are good for working with, so that you can explore that in your own life. Somatic therapy is really important. Our nervous systems speak the language of sensation, and this is why oftentimes talk therapy may not get us as far or where we want to go. So for people who are really wanting to tend to and work with the underlying causes of the anxiety, one of the things that we want to do is work with a somatic therapist. Somatic therapists are going to help us to work with our nervous systems and our bodies on a sensational level, which is the language our nervous system speaks. And it's really potent and incredible and powerful when you experience it, because what starts to happening is you aren't having to tell your trauma or survival stories over and over and over again and be re-traumatizing yourself. You're actually able to go through a process of working with the sensations that are in your body and the anxiety and the charge that comes out without having to go through your story over and over and not really getting the results that you're looking for. The second part of somatic therapy is having a support network. Having a support network is really important to navigating anxiety. And what you're really looking for when you start to look for your support group and your support system is people who you can co-regulate with. And this is really important, because what is happening with our bodies is our bodies start to vibe with each other, right? Have you ever felt where you're with a friend and they're super excited and giggly and laughing, and maybe that's not your vibe, but their energy just starts to bounce off of you, and then you feel like you're in that mode too? Well, that's part of co-regulation. What's happening is that our body's energy impacts each other. So if we're around people who are most often saying really self-deprecating things, who are also really anxious or having a really hard time, there's nothing wrong with having friends that are in that similar state. But if those are the only people you're surrounding yourself with, it is going to impact how you feel and what's happening in your body. So when you're looking for creating a support network or a group of friends or community for this new phase of your life, you really want to think about the qualities that you are wanting to feel in your body, and you're going to want to find people that exhibit those qualities and embody those qualities in their daily life, so that you can co-regulate with that energy and that you can build that in your own body, and that you're both starting to impact each other's well-being. Inner child work. Your inner child is the little you that still exists inside of you. That's that little person that maybe you had some kind of early childhood trauma or experiences with oppression or systemic racism or violence or all kinds of things, where that little person wasn't able to be safe and protected in the way that they needed to be by the adults and caretakers around them. And they had to take on that role of protector. And for a lot of children, the way that they take on that role of protector is by shutting down and leaving their body, because a lot of times for children, fight and flight aren't really an option. A lot of times the only option is to leave their body or go to a different reality. What happens to our inner child when we have experienced early childhood trauma or any kind of trauma is that that baby wasn't cared for in the way that they needed to be cared for, and that baby still exists inside of us. And so through inner child work, we are tending to our inner child, and we are becoming the adult, the protector, the caretaker that our inner child needed then that they didn't have. And now we get to be that for our inner child, and it has such a huge impact on our health and well-being. And so inner child work is super important on this journey. The RAS system, your reticular activating system. This is a really potent and important part of your body for you to understand and start to be able to work with. And I am going to be making many future videos about the RAS, because it's the thing I'm probably most passionate about. It's the part of your brain that filters out anything that it sees as unnecessary for the journey that you're on and holds on to information to support the story or the journey that you are going on. And this can backfire if we aren't doing intentional practice. It's just going to pull from our past traumatic experiences, the oppressive systems around us, our conditioning, all of these different things. It's going to pull all that information. And if we have self deprecating thoughts or we have a certain story of how we see the world, it's going to pull experiences from our past that are living in our body to help us create a narrative and a story of what life is like. And then it's going to basically be a huge part in what we pay attention to and how we move in the world. So, being in a deep relationship with the RAS system through intentional practices actually can help us to support our body in focusing on what we truly care about and the life we truly want to live, and being able to discard information that doesn't fit that narrative or that story, and to take in more information and turn our attention more towards narratives, people, scenarios, places in life that do fit the narrative of the life that we want to live. So the RAS system is a really important and crucial part of our body and piece to this puzzle. And so I'm definitely going to be sharing a lot of future videos about how to work with the RAS system. Shadow work. 90% of our behaviors, thoughts, feelings, and experiences are outside of our conscious awareness, and about 4 to 6, maybe 10% of our behaviors, thoughts, experiences are in our actual conscious awareness. And the things that are not in our conscious awareness, that 90% of our behaviors and actions and thoughts, don't just go away and not exist because we're not thinking about them or we don't realize they're living in our body. They're living in our body and they're dictating most of the way that we see the world, that we move through the world, and how we treat each other and how we treat other people around us. And so shadow work is really, really important. Another thing that is really important to understand is that we take in about 10 to 100 million bits of information per second in our unconscious, subconscious minds all the time. We're just taking in all that information from the world around us, our experiences, everything is just flooding us. And our conscious mind is able to process about 4 to 5 bits per second of information. So that means that there's about 100 million bits or so of information that's just living inside of our bodies in the same way as what I was talking about before, having a huge impact on how we feel, how we see the world, and how we move through the world. One of the things that's really important about embodied shadow work is we're starting to notice these glitches in our body and starting to tend more to the things that are outside of our awareness that dictate and impact so much of our life. There's a lot of things that we'll talk about in future videos to do some of this shadow work to become more aware of our experience that dictates so much of our behaviors. Nutrition and hydration. Most people who have anxiety are also chronically dehydrated and don't actually have the nutrition that their bodies need. And the interesting thing that anxiety does in our brain is that it kind of creates all of these stories and narratives of what could possibly be going on in our bodies. And it's usually the worst possible thing that could be true, the worst case scenario that sometimes is a little bit on the spectrum of a conspiracy, like maybe not really true. And sometimes it really can just go back down to the basics of like, did you drink water or did you only drink coffee all day and eat no food? Because that is a recipe for a panic attack. Did you drink coffee all day and have some chocolate and maybe a bite of bread? Because that would also be a recipe for a panic attack. Food and hydration are deeply important to navigating anxiety. Our bodies need to be hydrated. And one of the things that happens when we drink water is that it actually flushes out the high level of hormones that are in our body. And those hormones, when we have too much of them accumulating, can cause anxiety. And food is very important. We want to be eating a nutrient-dense diet. That's a huge topic. Could go on forever about our traditional indigenous diets, the ways that our ancestors ate, why they had such low levels of degenerative diseases and chronic illness and all of these different things, because of the ways that they tend to their bodies. But just as an overview on nutrition, you need healthy fats, you need healthy fats, you need healthy fats. Fat is basically the foundation of healthy brain function. Avocados, nuts that are soaked. I'll talk about that later in anti-nutrients, but that's very important. You have to soak your nuts if you're going to eat them. Cold pressed oils. This isn't to shame you, by the way. Like, you eat what you have access to, and just eating balanced food, no matter what grade or kind it is going to be better than just only having coffee all day. But if you're going all the way out on this, cold pressed oils for your fats. What happens with expeller pressed oils is that expeller pressed fats are using a chemical process to extract the oil out of the plant, and usually they're using the leftover discarded plant to get the oil from high heat expressed oils. You don't want that. You want cold pressed oils, which are using a natural process to press the oils out of the plant, and it's usually the first part of the plant with all the nutrients. So that's the best kind of oil. Olive oil is probably the easiest oil to find cold pressed. Coconut oil. If you don't like the taste of coconut, you shouldn't be using coconut oil, because if the smell and the taste of the coconut is not there, most likely it has been processed in a way that is expeller pressed, and it's not going to have that healthy nutrient value that you're needing. Animal fats is kind of like the main way that we need to be getting our fats, and I know that that's a huge controversy with this whole raw food movement, which I'm going to talk about in the future, because there's a lot to know about why our ancestors did not just eat a bunch of raw vegetables, and about anti-nutrients that grow on raw vegetables, and why we should be slow cooking, fermenting, and using our traditional indigenous ways of working with food. So nutrition and hydration, important. Resilience and epigenetics. Resilience is something that we can cultivate by building a community, building a support network around us, by the places and spaces we have access to, the food we have access to. There are a lot of things that can impact and be factors in our ability to experience resilience. And many of us do not have and have not had access to things that are birthrights that we all need to survive. And so that impacts our ability to cultivate resilience. But even if we didn't have those things as children, or even if there's certain factors we don't have access to, there are ways that we can reclaim our embodiment, and that we can reclaim some of our experience, so that we can cultivate more resilience in our bodies and in our communities. And with epigenetics, this is about gene expression, which is kind of complex subject that I will definitely oversimplify now and in the future so that it makes sense. Is that in the past, people thought, like, if, for example, your parents have cancer, you're just going to have cancer. They didn't understand gene expression. And what happens with gene expression is different genes are actually turned on and turned off, and they can be turned on and off throughout your life. So if your parent was pregnant with you and they had experienced high levels of trauma, you could be born with those genes turned on, where now your body is experiencing high levels of anxiety and all these things with intergenerational trauma. Sometimes what you're experiencing isn't just your experience, it's actually what was experienced by your ancestors and people before you. So these genes are turned on, you're born, and now your body is reacting to and in a heightened level of hypervigilance and fear and all these things. But those same genes that got turned on at birth based on your parents' experience can also be turned off based on these resilience factors, based on the somatic practices, embodiment, all of these things that we have access to and that we can cultivate in our lives. And this does not mean that we have full control over changing our whole lives. There are many structures and systems and conditions around us that prevent us from being able to fully embody and be the people that we are, that is our birthright to be. And also, there are many ways that we can reclaim our power and our agency and our control, so that we can actually turn genes on and off and live our life in a different way. It doesn't just have to be a death sentence. And I think that on an embodied level, when people talk about this concept of breaking generational curses, that's what that actually means on a somatic level. So all these steps that I just shared with you are really part of the foundation of healing from and moving through your journey of healing anxiety. These really aren't cookie cutter tips, but they're super crucial and important. And most people don't talk about them. I have no idea why, because because they are foundational to actually moving through trauma and anxiety, maybe because they're really uncomfortable to do. But we are here to really do this work because we want to live really fully meaningful and embodied lives. I share all these practices not to overwhelm people or to make it seem really big, because we take this one step at a time, and I'm going to support you and guide you on a journey of being able to have digestible pieces of how to work with this energy and these experiences. But it's really important to understand some of these foundational pieces of healing from anxiety, being able to work with the underlying charge or energy in your body, being able to tend to and learn from the trauma or past experiences that you have that your body may be reacting to in the moment, even though those things aren't happening right now. Understanding about nutrition and hydration and plants and medication and somatic practice and all of these different things, being able to see how all of these work together is really important, because what often happens is that when we don't have a foundation and don't really understand some of what is required to create kind of like a holistic map of healing and moving through these things, is that we can just start to kind of like do random somatic practices or take random herbs and hope that that will change everything. And then when it doesn't, we start to feel really shut down and hopeless and feel like this is just the way that things are going to be. It's going to be like this forever. And I just want you to know that it doesn't have to be like that forever. And by understanding this bigger vision and bigger picture of some of what is part of that healing journey can help you to really intentionally and thoughtfully make decisions and take steps to support you on your journey in a very intentional way, rather than just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. There is lots of fluidity in this journey and lots of ways for you to be creative and to try things out. And there are some foundational pieces that will really help you on your journey. It's really important to remember that healing from anxiety isn't about becoming a new person. It's about becoming who you truly are and who you have always been underneath that pain and suffering and fear. And through this process, we are going to be going on that journey of coming back to your truest essence. So hit the subscribe button, turn your notifications on, like this video, share in the comments below how this impacted you and what you got out of it and what you're feeling. I would love to hear about your journey and what has worked for you. And I'll see you soon for the next video.